Hi all, this is Allmighty and welcome to this video. Yesterday I actually also covered a game from the Grandchester tournament, but today when I woke up I actually saw that Saw has indeed won the tournament. So I wanted to take this opportunity to feature one other game that he played here against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. Actually it is a game from round 1, but it is the one game that you definitely need to see if you haven't been watching if you haven't been watching the rapid tournament. This game is definitely something else. So let me just jump into it. As we often see top players playing the rapid tournaments and blitz tournaments, they tend to play this not so popular openings because they want to surprise their opponents. And here Wesley with white pieces starts with knight to f3 and Maxime answers with c5. We have b3 and b6, so decided to fianchetto these bishops to b2 and b7, and now we have c4. Practically similar to the game that I've shown yesterday, where Kramnik with the white pieces then played against the English symmetrical. Here Wesley in round 1 also did pretty much the same thing. As you can see, after knight to f6, a symmetrical position. But they keep at it. After g3 and g6, we see first bishop captures on f6, so Wesley decides to give up his bishop to mess up the pawn structure here on the king side for black. I wouldn't say that it's a good thing or a bad thing for the moment. It really depends on how the game progresses. But the one thing is for sure, now black will have this bishop on this diagonal where white doesn't have one. But that is all for a reason. But just after this move, knight to c3, we see that Maxime, he returns the favor with bishop to f3. Pawn captures on f3 and now knight to c6. Once again, a dead equal position. Dead symmetrical. Bishop to g2, bishop to g7, and now for the first time after queen to e2, Maxime isn't the one who will repeat queen to e7. He decides that after 10 moves that it is ready for both of the players to diverge on different paths, and he plays king to f8. And judging by the current position, we saw for both white and black they have this very dangerous knights that can jump to d5 and d4. Having a knight in such a centralized position, eyeing a lot of squares, is very dangerous, so you don't want to allow that. And also when f4 and f5 are played, I mean the position demands it, these bishops will be very dangerous on this diagonal. So both players have something to look forward to, but what this means is that since both players have the same threats, it will be a similar position, and it is just a matter of who is faster. So we have castles first for white, now f5 by Maxime and f4 by Wesley. Bishop to f6, a move initially made just to make room for the king to come on g7 so that you can connect the rooks, and it's a good move. Now rook from a to e1, and this isn't anything like that Wesley is just going away from the battle on the queen side. He just wants to play this rook because now this knight is unpinned, and he can maybe jump to d5 at some point. King to g7, and now queen to d3. Moving the queen out of the way, the rook is a much better piece on the open file. This queen cannot imagine, we cannot imagine that the queen will be coming anytime soon on any of these important squares, so the queen cannot improve her position. So queen to d3 is a good move. Also, it prevents knight to d4 jump with the tempo. So we have rook to c8, moving this knight out of the pin, and now rook to e3. Wesley goes for the doubling up of the rooks. Knight to d4, and now since this knight on d4 could be potentially a really big danger for Wesley, he decides to get rid of it immediately. Knight to b5. And knight to b5 once again brings us closer and closer to the drawish endgame. After a6, knight captures on d4 and bishop captures on d4, and rook moves to e2. So now what we do have is, I would say, a dead equal position. One thing that, so both of the players have pretty much the same threats, both of the players have pretty much the same pawn setup, except this a6 pawn. So yeah, maybe you could argue that white pieces are a bit more active, but that is a little thing you can go on in such a position, also with having opposite colored bishops. We see rook to e8 played now by Maxime, but yeah, the players play on because it is round 1 and you would like to start with a win in the tournament. Rook to e1, you don't want to give up the e file to black. Rook captures and now queen captures. So capturing with a queen so that you can maybe come on e7. And just by playing bishop to f6, Maxime could have gotten out of this. Yeah, no harm done. Once again, the position is equal. Cannot do much about it. Bishop to b7 isn't a real threat. You can attack the bishop. If bishop captures here, you can play rook to a8. But in the end, there is no threat. But because of this, probably here Maxime plays d6, and he gives Wesley one thing to go for, and he plays it, queen to e7, so infiltrating the enemy's rank, the 7th rank here. And what will you do now? Bishop to f6 first, attacking the queen, and queen, if you exchange the queens, then you haven't done anything essentially. So here queen to b7 is played. So Wesley has gotten some advantage, positional advantage, and he wants to use it. Now having the queen on the 7th rank attacking this pawn, a5 needs to be played. But this allows now bishop to d5, because now this pawn is attacked twice, and you don't want to give up this pawn, because giving up this pawn would probably mean giving up the game. And how to handle this? Quite simply, you could have played queen to c7 and decided, okay, it is a drawn endgame. I don't want to try for anything. I mean, it was drawn from the start. But okay, of course, if you don't want to, if you exchange queens, then it's definitely a draw. If you want to go for a win, you have to play queen to a6 and then try something else. But here, as the English would say, Maxime tries to be cheeky and he plays rook to c7, hoping that Wesley will fall for his trap, because the queen now is in a not so good position, and I think that Maxime in his head thought that queen cannot capture on b6. But Wesley did capture on b6. And why Maxime, in my thinking, didn't think that Wesley can capture, because of this next move, rook to e7. And rook to e7, if you look at it at first, seems pretty dangerous. I mean, if your queen is attacked and your rook is attacked. If you capture the rook, then you lose your queen. If you capture the queen, then rook captures on e1, king goes to g2, and simply bishop to d8, you're up a whole rook. So did Wesley just blunder the game away? Well, not really, because here rook can capture on e7, and if queen captures on b6, Wesley does have some chances in the endgame. When I say he has some chances, he actually has better chances than black in this situation, because what also happened in the game, you will capture this pawn and you will then capture this bishop. And having a situation with this pawn setup, having this bishop on d5, king quite safe. When he comes on g2, there aren't any checks, so because of this bishop on this diagonal, having these pawns on light squares, so keeping the bishop here and also having a potential passed pawn, this is actually a very good situation for black. For white, sorry. So here, actually, a much better idea for black would be to just, just move on from losing the pawn and capture bishop to e7. Here white would have to, if he wants to go for better chances, he wants to play queen to a7, not exchange queens, because having an endgame of opposite colored bishop and with just one pawn and this pawn setup isn't enough to win the game. Here queen to a7 needs to be played to keep the tension on the 7th rank. The bishop cannot move because, once again, this pawn is attacked twice. But black can quite simply just go about king to f8, king to g8, king to g7 and wait for white to actually do something. He needs to create a passed pawn here, and as white and black would put it, he is definitely welcome to try. The problem, he can just play with the king because the queen, black queen, cannot challenge the white queen. But okay, this didn't happen in the game, so queen captured on b6 and rook captured on f7. King to h8, Wesley repeated once because it is always good to have some extra time. King to g7, rook to f7, king to h8, and now queen rook to f6. As we can see, by playing these moves, Wesley also saw that Maxime was ready to go for a draw with the repeating of the moves, so he didn't play king to h6. Okay, it is a better thing, but now he knows maybe psychologically that he is also psychologically in a better position. And now here, what do you want to do? You can go about defending this pawn, but it is quite a weak pawn. Rook will come back to f7, and then white will be in a better position, having this rook and this bishop, rook playing on f7 and b7, keeping the king in the corner. It is a good position for white. So here Maxime decided to create some chances for himself. He plays queen to b4, going for the d2 pawn. Rook captures on d6, queen captures on d2, and now rook to c6. So Wesley is determined to pick up as many pawns as possible to create a pass pawn. And here Maxime could have just continued with queen captures on a2, and after that queen captures on b3. But for some reason he decides that he doesn't want to give any more pawns to Wesley, and he plays queen to d4. But now the queen is in a very awkward position, and you will see soon why. First, king to g2. So not allow any checks with the tempo. For black here, the bishop is here, as I've said, not allowing on the light squares, and also the king isn't anymore on the first rank. And now the question is, what can black play? Okay, he can play the pawns, but playing of the pawns is met with white's response also playing of the pawns. So he tries king to g7, but this is met with rook to c7 check, and king quite simply has to go back to the corner. If you want to go king to h6, then h4 can be played, and bishop to g8 is always hanging in the air, and you don't want to give yourself that, because then capturing on h7, some checkmate ideas, really not the best position for black here. King to f6 is of course met with rook to f7 checkmate, so king has to go back to h8. And now we see first h4 is played, black responds with h5 because it doesn't have a move, and now a4. Positional Zugzwang. Here in this position actually Maxime resigns the game, and when I said positional Zugzwang, it essentially means that queen has to move. The king cannot move. Okay, you can move the pawns, but you will just give up pawns. So g5 is met with pawn captures on g5. h4, you can play g6, and g7 and g8 is unstoppable. You have to give up the queen. There are no more checks besides h3, but you just pick up the pawn. So this isn't a good idea. And what you need to do, you have to move the queen. The queen cannot go on any good squares to actually keep defending this pawn. So you can try with queen to d3, but rook to c5, queen to b3, and rook to a5. And as you can see, rook can quite simply come to a8. It is defended. The combination of this bishop, very strong bishop, in the center of the board, and this rook, putting it on the light squares, giving checks and pushing the pawns, is quite enough for white to actually win this game. So this is why before couple moves here, after a4, Maxime resigned the game, and this brought Wesley a very nice victory. So, and also taught somebody about this endgame, having the bishop and rook against the queen. So this is why I wanted to show you this game. Let me just quickly show the standings. As we can see, Wesley with 6 out of 9 wins the tournament. He did lose one game against Mamedjarov quite early in the tournament, but that didn't really bother him that too much. He started the tournament with a nice win, and he kept that win with that half a point that he needed until the end, so in front of Nakamura and Karakin. So yeah, this is pretty much it for this game and this video. Tomorrow I'll just continue with some other stuff, but I wanted to once again share a nice game by Wesley, since he did win this tournament. So yeah, this is pretty much it. As I've said, I would like to thank you for watching this video, and I will see you next time.